you have a bunch of healthy food around your house, you'll eat healthy. If you have a bunch of chips around your house, you'll eat chips. What you have in their environment matters. If I was reading on my phone or a Kindle, they weren't interested in reading. If I pulled out a book, physical book, all of a sudden I had two little kids sitting next to me reading their physical book. I don't want the TV to feel like that's the main thing we do. If your whole house kind of organized around the TV, then it's like TV is who we are. Reading books is who we are. Going for a walk is who we are. Our dining room, we put a pool table there because it's right in the middle of the house and it's just basically beckoning to the family, come play with me.
Welcome back to the Open Ed Podcast. I'm your sometimes host, Ella, and today I'm joined by Dr. Claire Honeycutt. So Dr. Claire is a second-time guest, which I'm very excited about. I think you're probably our second-time guest. And so this is super exciting. If you have not heard her first episode, go listen to it. It basically talked about how you went from being a researcher and a tenured professor, just like really deep inside of your career, to deciding to leave it all and homeschool your kids, and how that has kind of changed the way that you homeschool as well, because you bring your research love into homeschooling, and you help a lot of families through that. So today we're going to get all the way deep into that. But welcome back to the podcast. It is amazing to see you again.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I always love talking to you guys. You have so many cool and exciting things going on, and I just love how you are just so integrated into inspiring parents to take charge of their kids' education and individualizing that. And it's really beautiful. So I'm so excited to talk to you today.
No, I absolutely love that. So I want to dive into your Substack, your podcasts, all the things that you've been doing recently, your writing. Something that I love about you is that you put everything out there for people to learn from and for them to build on, for their own family, for them to like figure out, okay, what works for me, what doesn't. And something that like I've heard you say in other areas is that one of the questions that parents ask you the most is, where do I even begin? Because when you get into homeschooling, right, there are so many different approaches and so many different people that are telling you, here's the right way, here's the wrong way. Where do you recommend that people begin? And then I kind of want to take it like subject by subject, and probably starting with the parent relationship though, but where do you even recommend that people begin?
Well, so what I always tell people to do at the beginning, because I do think it's completely and totally overwhelming. And now that I've gone all the way down all the rabbit holes and all the different subjects, I can just, you feel a lot more comfortable about it. But at the very beginning, I tell people just pick something. It doesn't have to be perfect. Particularly a lot of times they, when they're starting out, they have young kids. Just let someone else make these decisions for you. Find a company that you relate to, a curriculum that you relate to, and that like fills your home values. And that can be very kind of different, right? For different people. Like you may be like, I'm a very classical model. And it's like, okay, go do, Memoria Press. Or I want to kind of, my children to like love and learn. It's like, okay, find a Montessori curriculum or a Charlotte Mason curriculum. Find something that kind of just works for you and just start with that. Super simple. Just let someone else make these decisions for you. And the other thing is that you don't really know how your children are going to relate to a lot of those things yet. And then from there, you can start to say, math isn't really clicking for us, or writing isn't really clicking for us. Let's go out and look. But then you're also coming from a place of, why isn't math clicking for your kid? Mm-hmm. Like if you picked a sex ed math, right? And you're like, my kid is really frustrated and bored. Like, okay, well then I need to find a more playful, fun math. But I have other parents that they have a really playful, fun math and their kids are having a hard time focusing on it. They're like, maybe I need to go to a Saxon. So I always tell people, just start with something. Start with something that's simple. Let a company pick it for you. Or find someone that you really relate to, that you work through and pick their choices. And be okay that, live with it for 6 months. And you're not going to ruin them in 6 months. It's not possible. And kids will grow, and you'll find new paths for it. Just start. And my story, for the record, is we started with a company called Prenda, which doesn't do homeschool anymore. So sad I can't tell you to use Prenda. But they do micro schools, and they did micro schools, and they just kind of held our hand. They're like, here's the math we recommend. Here's the reading we recommend. This is this cool science platform we recommend. And we just kind of played around with all those things, and most of them we don't use anymore. But I'm glad we had them when we had them. And I'm glad that we just started someplace. It helped me understand my kids. And I think that's where you're going to go next, right? It was all about finding a relationship with my kids, understanding how my kids learn and all of that. And then from there, you can go out.
Yeah, so let's dive into that. When you began, was there a specific like homeschooling mentality that you were most intrigued by, that you were following the most? Did you start that way, or what was your experience in that? And then as you started homeschooling, the relationship piece obviously becomes primary. And I think something that you've kind of talked about a little bit and we'll go into later a little deeper is building a home culture, right? Like that is the heart of homeschool. It is first there's got to be a culture that you're consciously building, and then on top of that you can help kids to learn.
So I wish that I could say I had this like really well thought out homeschool journey, but I did not, right? We were like COVID homeschoolers. We're like, what are we doing? And so we were kind of learning on the fly. I would say that we kind of definitely started closer to the unschooling model, very student led, student directed kind of learning. And I kind of feel like if you aren't doing at least a little bit of that in preschool, you're not really doing it right. But I also think that it kind of evolves. And I think that what my children needed when they were 5 and 3 is very different from my children need now at 9 and 11. And unschooling would not be, in the hardcore sense, like the radical unschooling sense, would not be a good fit for my kids now. And I always say, Michael Strong and I kind of overlap in this, that we kind of believe in this joyful yet also rigorous education, and that it's possible to blend those two things. And so I'm very grateful that I started in that unschooling space, because it helped me really ignite like the love of learning in my kids. And so if you have a kid that's coming home from school, I've interviewed several people who pulled out their kids from school and they were really struggling in school and they pulled them out to homeschool. Spending that time at the beginning in kind of a more unschooling model where you're just like getting to know your kid, igniting that love. And then from there, then you can bring the rigor and layer that on top. And I think I'm able to do the things that I'm doing now with like, we're literally reading Shakespeare over breakfast and like going really deep into like modern history and all these kinds of things. I can do that because they already love learning and we started there. So I think that it's okay to also, you don't have to pigeonhole yourself into like, I'm an unschooler, I'm a classical model, or I'm a Charlotte Mason person. And a lot of people are. It seems like that influencers are like that. But part of that's just because that's their brand and that's okay. But it's okay to kind of shift and move. And also for your children to be different. I interviewed a woman whose her oldest son just kind of more or less did kind of a very traditional school at home. But her youngest kid had significant anxiety issues. And she's like, I hardcore unschooled her. And she's like, and her kids they were just different kids and they just couldn't, it just wasn't going to be the right fit. She's like, I don't think my son would have done well with the freedom that we gave her because he just would have run wild with it. But she already had this kind of like, I want to sit and focus kind of mentality, but she was like overwhelmed with it. So, it's okay for your kids to be different and do a different model with both of them as well.
So let's say that you're a parent that's interested in unschooling, because the vast majority of parents that homeschool that I've talked to recently have actually been very intrigued by the unschool approach. What are some of the things that you need to know if you choose unschool? So like yesterday I chatted with a lady who works with Peter Gray, and she was actually saying that she doesn't like to throw all rules out of the window, but for her it's more of like self-directed education. Like she opens doors and her kids walk through them. And yeah, so how do you know, like, or at least in your mind, because you've done a lot of research around this, what are the things that are necessary to think about if you're going into this unschooling approach?
I think that unschooling, when done well, can be excellent, and unschooling done poorly leads kids to be addicted to screens and sugar and just good enough. And that they really are those two extremes. And so I think that if you're going to do unschooling, which again, when done well, is really excellent, you have to understand it is not easy. And it is not just letting your kids do everything all the time whenever they want. That there are certain things that are, that almost, I'll say it this way, everyone that I know that has done unschooling all the way through and ended up with kids in very rigorous, and like strong career paths, curated an incredibly rich intellectual environment for their children. It wasn't, just go play. Like maybe when they're little, it's like, go play outside all day. But when they were in middle school, these kids were reading the great books. They were watching documentaries on the, like, on great architecture. And it was student directed, but parents were taking them and leading them into paths and helping them gain proficiency and perseverance in specific fields, if that makes sense. And I've interviewed a couple different unschoolers. The neuroscientist in me also wants to say to people that there are, Maria Montessori was right, that there are these kind of sensitive time windows for kids, and that, there's a range for which kids might want to learn to read, and it's somewhere between the 4 to 8. But if you're getting to 10, are they going to be able to read? Yes, but it's going to be a lot harder for them. Thing goes around like rich language development. Kids in this like 6 to 9 age window are just, their brains are on fire, and they're learning like 50 words a day. I mean, it's crazy how much they're learning. And it's also a great time to learn math facts and memorize poetry and all those kinds of things, which, by the way, they actually also love to do at those ages. And so you can kind of encourage them to do those things. But if they don't do those things, then it makes other things harder later. And exposure to like really rich language and like complex language and like that kind of that naughty, archaic kind of language when they're young makes reading the complex text easier. So like my kids, I swear, read things, like my 11-year-old reads things better than I do because she just had this exposure earlier on in a way. And my youngest is the same way. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's a wonderful lifestyle. I do believe strongly that children should have a lot of freedom, and that, so like coming to like my kids are getting this rigorous education. My oldest, though, what she's really interested in right now is writing. And so we redid her days so that she has an hour to write every day and work on these very deep, intense projects in that space. But she's still also doing math, right? Like, so we kind of have these different, but she's kind of planning out her day and we kind of work with her. What I worry about is that there's some people online that make it seem that it's just this easy way and you just let kids just float around and that they'll somehow end up in college. And that's just not true. I just have seen no evidence that that's true. Now, I will say that there are some kids that might work for. There probably are some kids that are just like super self-directed and are just going to like figure it out. But I don't think it's all kids. And it certainly wasn't my children.
That's interesting. So you mentioned joyful yet rigorous education. And I want to kind of go into that a bit and why you say it that way. You obviously appreciate aspects of unschooling approach. You obviously appreciate aspects of giving your kids a lot of autonomy and choice inside of their own education. But how do you make it rigorous, and what is the argument for making it rigorous? Like, why would you actually want to make your kids' education rigorous?
Well, let's start there, actually. So for me, my goal is that when my children are 18, because that's what people have decided, not because that's the number for me, but at 18, that they have as many possible openings for them to go for as they can. If they want to go to college, great. I want that door open for them. I don't want them having to spend 5 years playing catch up so they can go to college. If they want to start their own business, I want that door open to them. I want them to have all of the background that they need to know to be able to get there. If they want to, there's infinite other places in the middle of that, right? So those are kind of the two extremes in some ways. And I see it as my job to build that up and build up all those different pieces for them. When you think about, so some people will say, well, as long as they love learning, they'll get there. That's true. The question is, how long will it take them to get there? There's some things that you can do when you're 8 and 10 that are way harder when you're 25. Kind of like if you want to learn a second language, everyone knows that children can learn second languages easier and faster. And if those children have learned a second language when they're younger, then it makes learning a third, a fourth, a fifth language as an adult much easier. And if that second language they're learning is a language from the Eastern culture, then they will learn, then all of a sudden you're opening up Mandarin and Japanese and Korean to them in a way that a 25 or 30-year-old can't do. So I really see that children's brains are these things to not fill with a lot of, but to make them as flexible and as compliant as we can, so that when they're older, they can go in any direction. Because the truth is like what I wanted to be a veterinarian when I was like 8. Like My 11-year-old has no idea what she wants to be. And I'm in a completely different place than I was even 5 years ago. And I think that we want to allow children, when they grow up to be adults, to be able to go in any direction and have the foundation in order to be able to go in all those directions, if that makes sense. At the same time, when I think about my children, it's very important to me that they are building, that they have time to build strength in the things that they are particularly interested in. I think that when you think about education, you can be broad or you can be deep. And I think you need to be both broad and deep, right? But you can't be deep in everything, right? You can only be deep in a couple of core things. So picking the things that they're innately talented in and innately good at, which tend to have an overlap in the young years, and allowing them depth in those while also keeping them broad enough to want to go in a different direction. My husband is in data analytics, and he would have told you that he did not like math class, but he didn't like arithmetic. But he actually did, once they got to algebra and calculus, it was more logic based and he could understand it better. And so if his parents had decided when he was 8 that, oh, you're just not going to like math and we shouldn't do math for you, this career path that he ended up being his whole life would have been cut off for him. Does that make sense? So I feel that we want to encourage children that sometimes you have to do hard things. Sometimes you have to work through things. Sometimes you grapple and be frustrated with things. But we also don't want their entire life filled with that, right? Like that, that you have things that you work on because they're important. And I do think that if you can't explain to a child why something's important, then maybe you do need to question whether it is important or not. But in terms of it's like math, you've got to be able to do statistics to be able to understand financial planning, which is super important for anybody. If my daughter wants to, let's say she wants to do a writing career, right? She's going to go be an individual writer. She needs to understand enough math and interest and all of those things to be able to pull it together, to be able to run a business and be able to financially plan for her family. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. So how do you introduce the rigor and structure to your children? Like, are there things that you can point to and say, yeah, they fought me on this and I just decided to either keep on saying that this is important, or how do you strike that balance between okay, this is rigorous and I know it's going to be hard for them and it's not enjoyable. And part of the hard thing, I think, when we get to the conversation of rigor inside of education is the fear that it's going to lose that joy, right? Joy, right. But rigor is a very, very difficult thing to achieve. And I think because of that, a lot of people sit in the joy or they sit in the rigor, and traditional education is very heavily rigorous, but there's very little follow your passions. Let's, make sure that you are enjoying aspects of what you're doing. How are you doing that with your children?
I was going to say, I actually just wrote a post about this, about writing. So I've been mentioning, and my daughter loves writing, writing. She hated writing. She came home from school and hated writing. And we went through this very slow process of bringing writing, making her friends, changing her relationship with writing. I think that a lot of times kids have this antagonistic relationship with learning. And it's changing that relationship. It's making it something that is enjoyable and playful and fun. And then from there, you can build anything. So for her, I wrote this very extensively about this. So you can find it online. But the first thing we did is take all the pressure off. It was like, you don't have to write. And that kind of very unschooly kind of model, right? Oh, you don't have to write. But then I would find whatever she was doing, she was sick. So it was does your store need a menu? Should we write up a menu? Does it need a sign? And so whatever they were playing, I incorporated whatever it was they were doing into her play, but it wasn't required. And then we started things, poetry. I think I talked about that in the previous episode, that poetry kind of was this first kind of big moment for her, because poetry breaks all the rules. You don't have to spell it right. A lot of times they make up words. A lot of times they change the tenses of things and they just do weird things. And so you could just do all of that. And so it was just what's a way that you can play with words? She doesn't want to write. Let's make her friends with words. Let's make that something fun. Make it a game. Make it something that's interesting. And then from there, we just kind of would talk about things. I started bringing in artwork, and we talk about the art, and she would kind of start to put together these sentences. And it was just this. So anyway, it's this slow process of changing their relationship with whatever they're fighting about with. And I do also think that there is about finding the right path in for your child. Sometimes I hate saying that because everyone's like, but how did you? I was like, I can tell you how I did it, but it's going to look different for your child. I mean, it's possible that my path will work exactly for your child, but it's also probably not. Like, I even look at my oldest and my youngest, the way that they interact with things is quite different. My youngest, all of her resistance to writing is more related to I just don't. It's just a different kind of resistance. I'm trying to think about how to describe her relationship. She doesn't really have a strong resistance to writing. When she doesn't want to do it, she's just like, I don't feel like doing it today. It's like, okay, you did it yesterday, so she just doesn't have that, and I don't have to worry about that for her. So I think taking the pressure off, spending time figuring out how to make it playful, and then making it something that's unique and special to them. Like, I remember one of the first things that my oldest really got excited about was like, we had them writing up like reports on like animals, and it was because she got to pick whatever animal it was. Like, I don't remember, actually the curriculum called for something like that. She's like, oh, I don't want to write about this. And I was like, well, what do you want to write about? And she was like, owls. And I was like, well, write it about owls then, right? I think the thing is, when you think about what it is that you're trying to accomplish with your kid. I want them to be a good writer. Like, oftentimes we're not trying to go for like, I want her to be Hemingway. It's like, I want her to be a competent writer. It's like, okay, well then what are the steps that necessary? She doesn't have to write about, boats or that historical thing or, that science thing. She can write about things that she's of interest to her. So you're kind of pairing something that's serious with something that's joyful. I don't know if that helped.
No, that does.
Rambling answer.
No. That helps. Do you think part of this is like I love the fact that you built an at-home library, or that's something that you're currently doing, and it seems like that's very embedded inside of the culture of your family, just like exposure to ideas, exposure to thinkers and literature and that stuff. I think a lot of kids see, like, as an example, at least from reading your content, Hemingway and Shakespeare and, Dickens and all of these people as school, right? Like, they don't see them as just great books. It's like school tasks to be done. And it sounds like in your family, you've approached this differently. Like, the way that you explain good books, very different. The way that you probably introduced poetry, very different than, hey, this is school and like, this is a task to be done.
That's totally true. I do think that your home environment matters. And back to the original conversation we had about unschooling, says if unschooling is done properly, you are providing your children with an incredibly rich intellectual environment. And it does seem like something fun. I do think one of the things I should just say is that if you want this for your kids, you have to learn to like it yourself. Like, you have to like it. If you're excited about it, particularly under teenagers, that gets to be a whole other different thing. But under teenagers, if you're excited about it, they're excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we read Dickens. I think, the reading thing, that was just because reading to my children is just a part of who we are as a family. We sit and we read. And from the very, very beginning, I actually had to convince my daughter that reading was a good idea too, actually. So
really?
we would be reading to her at night. She came home from school hating basically everything. So I have had a lot of experience reawakening a love of learning in children, at least one particular child. But it became one of those things that we do this. This is what we do. We read books together, and they still, everywhere we go, they take a book. Every time they go to bed, they had stacks of books in their bed. When we are reading, I read to them over breakfast every day. Their father reads to them over dinner every day. Different books. Dad gets the big epics, and I tend to do the Hemingway and the Dickens. But they come to them and they enjoy them. Like, we read Legend of Sleepy Hollow over Halloween. If you haven't read it recently, it's like hard. I was like, we would get to these words and my kids would be like, what is that? I was like, I have no idea. So we'd be having to look it up and be like, what does this word mean? Like, what is happening right now? Even my littlest one, she's like, I don't understand what's happening right now. But like, it was playful and fun. Like, we laughed and we joked. We're like, all right, let's try to feel like a puzzle, right? It was like, okay, what's happening? They're like, I think they're on the Hudson, and in the Hudson, there's this other town, and inside that town is this other place. And so we had to read it line by line by line and try to figure it out. And Shakespeare's the same way. Like, we're reading Shakespeare, like, what on earth does that mean? You know, like, we memorize Shakespeare. And so it becomes like this kind of fun puzzle that you're doing together. And it definitely doesn't feel like school. Like, my children, they have school books that they have to read. And, have to read is a strong word. They know that as part of school, they're supposed to read a school book. But they get to pick what that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I spoke to a woman, her name was Michelle, and she's also, we have a very similar feeling about, she's homeschooled all her kids all the way through, but we have very similar philosophy. And she was just talking about how she didn't feel like it was necessary for kids to like force get through a book. She said, let them date a book. Like, let them try out 3 different books and say, this book just isn't for me. She said, every book that I wanted them to read, I read to them. And I really liked that philosophy, because it's like, okay, we're going to read, the Iliad. But we'll do it as a family, because that's hard, It's like, but you're going to read, a book that is of interest to you. My oldest was reading, her curriculum said to read this Robin Hood, and she got she's like, Mama, I just don't like it. I was like, like Robin Hood? Like, everyone likes Robin Hood. Anyway, but she just I just don't like it. And I was reading with her, and I was like, I get it. There's parts of it I don't like. And I was just like, what is the value of forcing her to finish this particular book? Like, whatever. I just didn't see the point of it. And then she picked up 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I mean, I was like, okay, so you picked a harder book, So, and then it actually works really well, because she's really into France right now, because she's writing, her novel takes place in France. And so she's like, and she's putting all these things together. So
that's awesome.
It turned out to be the right book for her. And I think we want kids to challenge themselves in that space. But if there's books that are going to be hard books that you want them to read, or you think are really essential for them to read, well, you read them together as a family. And
I love that. No, I absolutely love that. Now, I want to know a little bit more. Why create a library inside of your home? So, you could have gone to the library, you could possibly use Kindles. Why create a library of physical books? I mean, a lot of people would say that, if you ever move, oh my gosh, you're going to have so many books to cart around. Why did you decide that was important for your family?
Okay, so we didn't at first. And we went through a minimalism phase. We have a very small house. So to decide to do this library thing, we literally had to build more library. We had to we had to buy things. So when they were little, it didn't really feel like it wasn't as important to us. I did think that physical reading was important to us. So what I noticed when my kids were tiny, and they don't need this as much, because now the habit's established. When they were little, if I was reading on my phone or a Kindle, they weren't interested in reading. If I pulled out a book, physical book, and sat down on the couch and read it, all of a sudden I had 2 little kids sitting next to me reading their physical books. So we had a decent amount of books, but not a ton. Those early years, I mean, gosh, there are just so many books. So we only had a couple that were really core, important books. We used the library to pieces. We went to the library. It was every week. And I remember when we first got the library card, it's like, you can only check out 25 items. And I was like, 25 items? Who would ever check out 25 books from the library? I was like, definitely us. So it was definitely I think we need more books. And I think we would just let them kind of pick and choose. That was such a and I when they were really little, I would take them to the science and history section. I was like, pick some of these books, and now readers, and they would just pick and pick and pick and pick. And so I don't think at the beginning, I think if I had wanted to have an early elementary school library, it would have been crazy. I don't even know that we could handle it. But as they've gotten older, what I noticed was that we went to the library so often that they had really kind of gone through. This sounds crazy. They really gone through all the books, and that wasn't really true. But they had gone through all the series they were interested in, because they have all the classics, but they were kind of hidden around someplace else. They're not out where everyone can see them. And so a lot of the main books are like the Wings of Fire. They love the Wings of Fire. They've been through all of those, and there's like horse diaries. They went through all of those, and there was like these Greek goddess ones. They went through all of those. So they had all these series they got into that are kind of the just like run of the mill. They're not like exceptional literature, but like I want them to love reading, so they read their books. And we just kind of been through all of them. And I was like, and the other thing what's happening is that they were going and they were just picking worse and worse things because all the good things they'd already done. And so I was like, I'm just going to start curating this. I'm going to start being like, and I thought about my children individually, and I was like, okay, what are some of these books that they would like and that I would like them to read? So I started purchasing some of those. And I always have to preface, I'm an ESA state, so I can like create a curriculum around this. And so like I was able to use some funds to kind of bring in some of those books. But the other thing I started doing is I went into like, I found some like the book list. So, like look at the Newbery Award winners. And I went to the really old ones first. And I was like, which of these look interesting to you? And then I would let them pick from a curated selection.
That's awesome.
And so then they're picking these really high quality books, right? And that's because like, look, these are these 10 books. And so for example, when my oldest didn't like Robin Hood, I said, well, just go to our book selection and see which one looks interesting. But all the books that are there, I would be happier for her to read any of them. Anything that she picks up, I would be excited for her to read, right? So to just have them, because there's going to be a day where your kid doesn't want to read that book, or at least in my family, like they always want to have a book. They always like have to go to the library, get more books. And so it's like, well, just go look. And if they'll pick it up and they'll find something. And if it's there, it's kind of like if you have a bunch of healthy food around your house, you'll eat healthy. If you have a bunch of just chips around your house, you'll eat chips around your house, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like what you have in their environment matters. And I'm not saying that don't have the other one, but I think that's why it was really important to me to have an obvious place that they could go and pick books, to make the friction, that there's no friction. It's just, here's some beautiful books you can have if you're bored today.
I love that. Do you allow a TV in your home?
Yes, but we don't watch it. And our culture is that we actually, I changed this, was it last year? I've been meaning to write a post about it, actually. We decided, so we always had we watch one movie a weekend. We always let the kids watch a movie on the weekend. But they had been picking just kind of like, oh, we're going to watch that one again. And so we just kind of stopped. We're like, oh, the kids watch their movie on the weekend. And about a year ago, I was like, what are we doing? Like, I'm always like, you've got to read high quality literature and you've got to, read all this stuff. I was like, why aren't we watching the best movies that were ever created? Like, so, I mean, it's like, it's a beautiful art form. There's nothing wrong innately with movies, So so I've actually recently, we found this list of like great kids movies and we're kind of working our way through it. And that's been awesome. So now the whole family sits down and we watch a classic movie. And that's been really cool too. I thought the kids weren't going to like them, but then we watched over Christmas, we watched Miracle on 34th Street, the original. It's black and white. And the kids were like, Mom, it's black and white. And I was like, yes, it is, honey. And she was like, that's so cool. It's like, oh my gosh. When I was growing up, I was like, oh, black and white, can't even handle that. And they just think it's the coolest thing ever. And then it is kind of cool, actually, because they have, a picture of the street and it's all the old timey cars and like the way the stuff was and stuff. And the kids are just like, oh, cool. And so we've started kind of bringing those things into their world. But I will say that when they were really little, we decided that we didn't want the TV. I read this article about building your life around your values back then. And I was like, I don't want the TV to feel like that's the main thing we do. And so if the room if your whole house kind of organized around the TV, then it's like TV is who we are. And it's like, not who we are. Reading books is who we are, or, going for a walk is who we are, or whatever it is. Homeschooling is what we are. And so when they were little, there just wasn't a TV in the main playroom. And actually we turned the formal living room was just a playroom, right? It was just hardcore, the toys, it was all the things. We wanted them part of our family. And to just say, this is what we do. And yes, it's messier. Like I see people posting about that. It's like, oh, look at they're so into all the things. Like, yes, it was absolutely messier. It was absolutely more drama with cleaning the house. But it was so worth it because now my kids never ask to watch the television. Never. Except for on the weekends because they know they get the movie. But the question is, what movie are we watching this weekend? It's not, can I watch TV now? It's, what are we watching and when are we going to watch it together? which is a completely different way to like think about the TV. And now we did actually put the TV back in the living room because it just because it's the way rooms look, but that's not how they use the space. In the middle, that's where all of the board games are, and we use that space as a board game place and a place for us we actually rearranged we did a home remodel purposely so we could rearrange the house so that it was around having inviting spaces for reading and playing games together. Our dining room, which should be the dining room, is now we put a pool table there because it's right in the middle of the house, and it's just basically it's saying, beckoning to the family, come play with me. We all should come play together. And so I think I got way off of what the question was. I don't know if I was answering the question. But yes, we have a TV. No, we don't really watch it, and we don't. And I think we're okay. Anyway, I think that's where we were. Sorry.
No, that is exactly what I was curious about. And similar to that, like, do you have any strong feelings about AI, technology in education? How do you pull that into their education as well?
This is something I need to spend a lot more time thinking on. I can tell you my early thoughts. There are two different ways. There's two different ways that AI is probably more than two, but let's just say broadly that there are two different ways that AI can be utilized. Is where you're having it write your paper for you, which by the way, it's really terrible at, but let's just, for that sake, or it's going to do your math problems for you. The other way is like the way Math Academy is using AI, which they're actually saying they're using AI, and I'm sure they are using some pieces of it, but it's more just like these LLMs that are able to kind of give customized feedback to kids in a subject like math. And I think the customization, the individuation of education in that way. My kids are there's this new program called Spelling Safari. It's still pretty new, but it's like the same thing, but with spelling. I'm like, oh my God, thank you. Like someone else to and it's fun and it's playful. I think utilizing it in those ways, in a limited way, and I'll talk about why limited in a minute, is very effective and useful. I will tell you that though we are using Math Academy with my oldest, I still teach her every lesson. Every lesson. I'm the one who teaches it to her. And if she gets stuck, I'm the one who helps her through that stuck. So what it's mostly doing for us is saying, these are the things she needs to know. Oh, she's missing that. Let's review it. It's creating all of that back end, which actually it's just amazing. And it's so helpful. And I do recommend Math Academy for people. And then there's this other way that AI is being utilized. And I think that, so people like to say that AI is going to be capable of doing what I just said that I'm doing for my daughter, that it can 100% teach kids. I don't want to say that I don't think it's ever going to be capable of that, but as someone who's worked very extensively with AI, and I use it a lot, it's really not good at thinking, right? And if you're trying to teach someone how to think, you have to be able to think. I know that sounds crazy, but let's say, like, just for the writing, it can't think orthogonally. It can't have new thoughts. It looks smart because it can summarize all of human knowledge really quickly, but it can't have a new thought. It can't create something new or artistic or that. It can just kind of pretend that it does the thing. And it also, for right now, will just lie to you. And they can't stop. If they could stop the hallucinations, they would have already. They don't know how. Don't know how to do it. And you can catch it lying. And it also can't organize. It can't organize. Like, one of the most important things when you're like writing something is like organization. Like, I have this, and I have that, and I have this, and I have that. It can't do that. And so, do I think it's going to be useful? Yes. I'm actually starting to figure out, I'm thinking very carefully about how to introduce it to my children in a way that's effective, and also that they're a little skeptical of it, so like they know how to kind of play around with it. Like, I will use it with them. Like, this is how I ask it, and I'll even tell it, like, what am I looking for here? How could it be wrong? How do I verify that it's right? And I can say under what categories. Like, if I'm saying, a grammatical question, it's like, is it like this or like that? I was like, probably will do that one pretty well. I said, but there's other categories it doesn't fully know, or it'll have a bias, as we talk about that. I don't know if that was helpful.
That is so amazing. So you're coming to your own understanding, right? And like it probably makes sense too that like your kids, what you've done and what is very clear through our past conversation and also everything that you shared is that you've been very intentional about what you're exposing to them at different stages of their life and different stages of their learning journey. So it seems like um it's not as important to you right now to make this a priority because they still have time to learn it. And also, it possibly could get in the way of the things that they're learning now.
And thank you. And that's actually what I wanted to talk about is that I think if you, my husband and I talk about this because we are in different domains. Um, if you are an expert in a domain, AI makes you better. If you are not an expert in a domain, it can make you worse.
Hmm.
And so like if I think about something like, so let's switch gears. We've been talking about writing. My husband does like data analytics, but part of the thing he uses it with is some coding. He is an expert at coding. So he's able to create the structure, the framework. He's able to debug it. He's able to catch it when it's wrong. He's able to put all these things together. So it makes him exponentially faster, like so much faster at what he's doing. But it's because he's an expert. He watches other people who are newer and younger and aren't experts flounder with it. And they end up with code that doesn't make sense or doesn't work. And so when I think about our children developing a skill, I think it's important that they develop the skill first and get as good as they can get and then ask for feedback. And I think that, and then from that feedback, recognizing that not all of the things it gives you are good suggestions. So like I will give a post to Grok and say, critique this. Now, if I said, do you like this? It always likes it. Oh, I love this. This is the best post you've ever written. But if I say, critique this, there's things it will say that are good. And there's things it will say that I'm like, no, you're wrong about that. You're just wrong. Or like, if I say, or I'll, sometimes like, if you're writing a sentence, you're like, oh God, better way to say this. I just can't figure it out. And I'll ask it, I'll like, can you say this better? Sometimes it says it better. Sometimes it says it worse. The reason I can use it that way is because I'm already an expert. I've already spent decades becoming a good writer, right? And so when I think about introducing my children to these pieces, it's like if you're using it as like Wikipedia, right? Or like if Wikipedia is not perfect, right? If you're using it as a dictionary, great. If you're using it to look up something that, it's most likely going to get right, fine. But if you're using it to critique your writing, you need to be good at writing first. You need to be good at thinking first. You need to be able to like instead of saying, hi, can you give me a synopsis of Anna Karenina? Like for what purpose? So like decide if you're going to read it or not. Okay, fine. But like if you're trying to understand or think through it, it's like the other thing about a piece of literature, if you're reading literature, it's going to be different for you than it is for me. There is no one right answer for how you're supposed to interpret the human experience of reading a novel. So I don't know if that was helpful.
That is probably one of the best explanations of AI and homeschool I have ever heard. So thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, thinking out loud is actually quite helpful, and I would say I'm pretty similar where you're at, where like there's just so much that you still don't know. There, like it is such a new thing still. You can't even look at the research behind it, brain develop. Like you literally can't. And so now just reasonable people have to think through it on their own and decide what's right for their family. And I think your analysis makes a lot of sense and is worth thinking through. I also want to ask you. So we've chatted a lot about your home, about your education. We've gone into unschooling and different approaches to learning. It sounds like you're kind of in between this like curator role and slightly mentor-ish, right? Like you curate a ton, but you're also involved, very involved, more involved than the average, probably unschooled parent is. So, what does a normal day look like for you and your family? And then, how do you bring in the self-directed approach? I know you've mentioned that like you'll change their schedule for it, but like, what does your outline look like for yourself and for them?
Okay, let's talk about the breakdown of the day first, I think. I actually have a post that I'm writing about this. As you think about curating your day and how you manage your time. But I think you have to think about your values. For us, that has a lot to do with family time and having high contact points. It's also about time with dad, about literature. It's about a core piece of the day. I would also say one of the things that I think is important when you think about your schedule is having a routine so that you're not constantly having to be like, and now it's time for this, and now it's time for that, and now it's time for this. It's every morning we get up, they have their basic chores that they do, get ready for the day. We read over breakfast, whatever we're reading, and then we do our core subjects in the morning. The hardest subjects. They always pick to do math first, even though I've been trying to encourage them to play around with that, but that's what they do. We do math, we do writing, and they have some reading. Sometimes they get to the piano in the morning. In the afternoons, I run a science club on Mondays. So they love that. That is absolutely last week we were studying rivers. And so we were in the backyard with like sand, and it was a terrible, crazy, messy, amazing, fun. So much fun. Anyway, so I run a science club, and then they have piano lessons on Tuesdays. We also do history on Thursdays, and Wednesdays and Fridays are kind of open for them. Sometimes they play with friends. Sometimes they get into other things. Really up to them, and I try to help whatever it is that they want. It's kind of an alpha school model in the sense, like alpha school is like you get all the stuff done in the mornings and the afternoons, kind of playtime, like kind of self-directed time. It's a little bit like that, except that I don't see the core academics as something to get through. It's more of something that's important to us and that we enjoy and that we spend time doing. My youngest isn't super in love with writing or, the literature in the same way. She's a STEM kid. She loves math. So she spends more time on math than she spends on the other subjects. When she doing her writing, like last time she wanted to write up a report, I was like, why don't you do it on like your favorite animal, right? That's because of more of a sciencey kind of feel to it. So she writes up links. So she's going to be spending, even though she's still going to do math, reading, and writing, she's making some choices in like what she's writing about is a more STEM focus. And she's spending a little bit more time on that, but she's still going to learn the basics, if that makes sense. My oldest, we were doing math, reading, and writing, but then she was like, all of a sudden she was like, I want to, submit competition short stories. And I was like, okay. And then she was like, I want to write a novel. I was like, okay. And so it's like, all right, so we've got to find time. So we had to we rearranged, how much time she's spending on math versus her reading so that she can spend an hour doing writing. And a lot of times it's not enough. So I always say the first thing you do every day gets done. So our mornings are definitely the core. We always have lunch together, and we usually read over lunch as well. Usually a lot of times it's history over lunch. And then the afternoons are a little bit more self-directed. For my children, history and science are play. Like they think it's super fun, even though it's very rigorous. It's very rigorous. We talk about very serious, like when we were talking about rivers, it was, we were talking about flow patterns and how like you think that a river is just going to run straight down a hill, but it doesn't. It curves. And they came up with their own hypotheses about creating dams and how waterfalls are created and all these different kinds of things and why it's actually important and how the Grand Canyon was just like a river eroded that over time and how rivers change over time and how humans have to control it. And anyway, it's very exciting. And they had a really good time with it because it's fun and playful. What's the second part of the question? Maybe I answered it already, which was just kind of incorporating their interest.
So basically, what is the balance for you between being a curator and also like hands-on approach? This is what we're doing.
I would say that I am definitely more of a curator than this is what we're doing. I definitely pick the books that we read over the breakfast, but they have a lot of say in that. Like, so for example, they're really into Shakespeare, and so the Shakespeare company that's here is doing Merry Wives of Windsor and Henry V. And so we're going to go see those. And so we've been reading Merry Wives of Windsor and Henry V over breakfast. While I chose those, I mean, really in a way, the local Shakespeare company chose it. And then we wanted to go see them as a family. And so that still feels like, even though I'm choosing it, it's just kind of part of our family values. I chose The Legend of Sleepy Hollow because it felt like Halloween and that kind of be fun. Like we read The Christmas Carol because it's Christmas and we should do it. So I definitely choose those things. I do think you do put a lot of things in their path. I would say that because of the family culture that we've created, I almost never bring something to them that they don't like. Like, so recently we introduced them to opera. I thought it was like, I thought I was gonna like write this big post of like, oh, it's really hard. And like I introduced them to, and they felt it was instant. It was like instantly in love. And I'm like, oh, well, I better learn a lot more about opera now because I don't know anything about opera. And so I'm like learning all about opera. Almost anything I put in front of my children, they are obsessed with. And I write about that often online. I'll say everything society told me my children would hate, my children love. Like my children love classical music. They love opera. They love classic literature. They pick up Jules Verne just because, I think that people don't recognize how cruel the world is. And that if you just show it to children outside of this school mentality, like, oh, I have to do that. Like my kids never feel like that about stuff. I do think there's some days where they're like, I don't really want to do math today. But I will tell you, my oldest, she knows that if she takes too much time off of math, that math gets harder. And so we were talking about moving to a 4-day-a-week schedule because we wanted to add this club. And she's like, Mama, I want to do math 5 days a week. She's choosing that. So we're having conversations with her about that. So, as they get older, they start to understand. You help them understand why something's important and how they want to do things. She's had, with her math curriculums, I've been through a lot of math curriculums, but she's been a part of all of them. We have conversations about it. Like, well, what are you not liking about this? Okay, we're struggling with this. Well, I did a lot of research and I think this is maybe the best path. Do you think we should go this direction, or you think maybe we shouldn't go that direction? And so we have conversations about it. It doesn't always feel, the only thing that's consistent is that she has to learn math. I told her she doesn't have to go through calculus, but she does have to learn math. She has to do math, reading, and writing. But there's a lot of maneuverability in those pieces. And almost everything else is curation, and my children love it.
So how did you decide what that minimum standard was? Because what it sounds like is that you've done a really good job of having conversations with your kids, making them very aware of the fact that they can co-create this and that they actually do have a say. And then the other thing that it sounds like you've done an amazing job with is creating a culture in your home of wonder for the world. So it's like learning is everything. Like you're just always learning. I was scrolling through some of the things that you absolutely love doing, and like these are just peak because they completely illustrate exactly what we're talking about, which is like you have backpacks that are packed for everywhere school. Like basically there's always something and you just take them. School books, it's like that's awesome. National park passes, of course. Like you said, turning every drive into a science field trip so that you'll get specific books about where you're going. Telescopes,
that Roadside Geology thing has changed our whole life. Like, oh my gosh, that is the coolest book. And everyone should have one of those for their state, because you're just like driving around, you're just like, that's a volcano. That was a volcano, like however many million years ago. It's the coolest thing. Everyone should get one of the geology roadside books. They're awesome.
No, I absolutely love it. Like all of these like very practical small things that are obviously turning your just home and your experience of life with them into something that's an opportunity to learn. And it is very apparent talking to you that like you love learning about this stuff too. Like even whenever, you're learning about rivers and you're learning about different areas in the world, like there is no world in which we as, one individual human learn everything there is to learn. And so like to be alongside your kid learning the things that they're learning is just the coolest thing ever. I love that. Like I absolutely love that about you. Is there anything that's hard still though? Because I think like every parent has this ideal that my kid is, that they love learning and you're saying all these things that you've figured out. Are there any things that you're still working through and trying to understand?
We are, I always say, I'm trying to think of a percentage. It's so high. 90% of our learning in my household is loved, but there's 10% that's not. And it also shows up often during growth spurts, hormone changes. And I think, so my little one, I didn't even know how much it was until I watched my little one kind of go through it. My little one is starting to kind of do some of these changes, and there'll just be days where it's just like we'll be doing our math facts and she's like, boom, boom, boom. And the next day it's like 32. And I'm like, you knew this yesterday. Like what happened? And I think that recognizing that, like this week, and what homeschooling often will allow that. So like this week, I knew she was having a tough time, and I'm like, we're just gonna not wake her up. Like we're just gonna let her sleep extra today. And then all of a sudden, and then she was better, you know. And so I think recognizing that those things happen and giving a little bit of flexibility with them. One of the other things I would say that we used to do a 4-day-a-week school, which I think when the kids are tiny, like I'm not talking about your 5-year-olds and your 6-year-olds, but like your upper elementary kids, you can really pull off a 4-day-a-week. But what I recognize what's happening is that it puts stress on it. And like if they were having an off day or a rough this, or you know, something would come up or they were sick, that like it made it a little stressful. So we went to 5 days a week, and it's ironically been less stressful because they can have a bad day and I can just say, you don't have to finish that thing. That's okay. I do want to tell people that, you know, your kids are not going to just magically love everything all the time. I think you have to keep searching for the perfect fit. And even that perfect fit might not ever be perfect. Mm-hmm. Spelling, we did switch to spelling safari, that changed our world. With spelling, grammar, I love the Fix It grammar because it's super short, super simple, super practical. So it's like, what's the minimum that I have to do to be able to accomplish this task? That, you know, because some of these things you have to know some grammar, you have to know how to spell things. And so it's like, how do we get that down so we can spend most of our time doing the thinking process that builds to the writing process, which can be really joyful, like looking at paintings and talking about them and building out literature and those kinds of things. Math, I think the thing about math is that it's so obvious that you got it wrong. And maybe grammar spelling that is that way too, but with writing in general, like there's more than one way to say it that can be right? There's usually a better way to say something, but they're not at the stage where that matters quite yet. You know, like that's what professionals, where you have to like make sure it says exactly the right way, right? And math, it's like, oh, that's wrong. Oh, that's wrong. And I think that is very hard for your perfectionist kind of kid. Finding a program that really suits your kid and not being scared to trial it out, and also not being scared to pull them back. I think the hardest thing for parents, like if your kid is struggling, is to say, we're going to stop and we're going to go back. We're going to go farther back. Because if they're struggling, they're probably not where you want them to be. And you're going to be like, nope, we're going to stop and we're going to go back. Mm-hmm. And I had to do that with my kid. And now and it's dramatically transformed things. So if you're hitting struggle points, don't be scared they don't have to depends on what their goals are, you know, figure out where it is that you want them to be and the micro steps to get there. Most kids don't have to get through calculus unless they're going to be a STEM kid. And if you get them all the way through, you know, the algebra 1, algebra 2, geometry, in high school, they can pick up classes really easily. If all of a sudden they decided when they're 18 they wanted to do something in STEM, they can do calculus in a year, you know. So with your kids that are with reading, it's just like, wow, just help them fall in love with reading. I mean, after that, they can read anything if you can just help them fall in love with reading and read the hard stuff with them, so they're learning how to decode it. And then it's not. I think the thing that's scary with reading is it's just like, I don't know what's happening, and like I must be stupid. It's like, no, that's just. It's hard. No one knows it's hard, you know. I don't know if that was helpful. I feel like I kind of went off. I think it's about curating that love for kids and trying to keep that alive. But yes, there's going to be hard things, and that it's good to have hard things. You know, you need a child that's gonna come up against something hard and keep working. Mm-hmm. You want them to have hard things in their life. You don't want to be too terrible. No one really wants really big tragedies for their kids, but it's going to make them stronger to have some hardships, and working through hard things is going to make them better and stronger, because they're going to go out into the world and they might get fired, or they might have their boss say, oh, you didn't do that right, or they're going to make mistakes. Nobody goes through. I made mistakes this week. Like, nobody goes through life without making mistakes. And math is like the perfect place to just practice. What do I do with a mistake? Breathe, and we try again, you know? And so if things are hard, it's so hard to watch your kids struggle and be miserable. but remember that they're learning something in that moment too.
Mm.
And that you can just be there. And sometimes all they need you to do is just hold them and give them a hug and be like, you're okay. It's okay.
Yes. Yeah, this is amazing. I think it comes to the core of like modeling resilience for your kid and also instilling it in them as young people. Like very different than in a traditional school setting. Like you as a parent can come next to them and say, "Hey, I know this is hard for you. I know this is really challenging. I'm in this with you. I'm going to try and help you figure this out, but you have to say that this is important for you to figure out too. And you have to know that you can figure it out. Like this is not something that is just like unfigure outable. Every single problem is something that you can figure out. It's just the question of, okay, how hard are we going to work to get there?" And it was really cool actually listening to Jansen Bradshaw, who is on Instagram and really cool. She built a program for kind of tutoring, but her daughter hated reading, hated it. It was so hard for her. And she thought it was going to be amazing because her first daughter got it very quickly. And like years into it, she finally started to get better at reading and she's finally started to like overcome it. And now she's an amazing reader. But she was sharing her story a lot and she went to her daughter and she was like, "Hey, are you okay with me like sharing the fact that you struggled with this?" And she was like, "Oh my gosh, mom, like I'm so proud of the fact that I overcame this. Like this is something that I'm so proud of." And I think seeing it as an opportunity for that and recognizing the fact that okay, it's not going to be fast, it's not going to be easy, but like at some point it can be one of those things in your kid's life that are just like very life defining, makes it more exciting as a parent to say, okay, like this we're going to go all in on trying to figure out.
I agree with all that. That was beautiful. Well said.
Okay, I have a couple rapid fire questions for you. And thank you again so much. This has been so phenomenal.
This has been really fun. You've actually had me think about a lot of things, which has been awesome.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Question number one. What are some books that you'd recommend for parents that are beginning their journey and just kind of like trying to think through, okay, I'm a curator, I'm like building this education for my child. Where should I begin?
I always like to recommend Well Trained Mind and Peter Gray's Free to Learn. They are polar opposite books, but that is my philosophy. It's between those two. Well Trained Mind is going to talk to you about all the very detailed. This is how you teach reading. This is how you teach, and I think you need to know some of that stuff. And then Peter Gray's Free to Learn. Is it Free to Learn? I think that's the title of it. And it's a very unschooly kind of model. And I think that you need both of those in your world. If you want to figure out how to mend those, you can come to my website. That's what I talk about.
Second question. What would you recommend people start with? So where should they start if they go to your website, podcast, blog post? What is like one that you're like, go there? And we'll include this one in the description.
Awesome. Well, if you just go to clarify.life, right under there's a thing that just says start here, and you can click on that and it kind of gives you the background. But what I recommend is that you can just go to the top posts. So right underneath the start here, there's just a little banner. It says top posts, and you can click on that, and it'll just have all the most favorite ones right there for you. And I will say that if you have anything that you're like, oh, I'm struggling with reading or writing or math, like if you scroll down, it will literally say reading, writing, math, science, history. So you can just kind of pick any one of those that you're struggling with.
That's amazing. We'll include a couple of those also just below this episode so that people can find those a little easier. And last question, what is your favorite learning resource right now?
Learning resource?
Yes, something that you're using, especially because you have access to an ESA because you're in Arizona, right? So you kind of get to be a little creative with like different types of learning resources.
We pay for things. Favorite. I've already mentioned Math Academy, which I do think is really good. We're really loving Opera right now. Just all around favorite, or just like something that you probably wouldn't expect to like that you should probably get for your kids.
I mean, do both. I'm intrigued by both.
I was going to say all around. I was going to say if you've got a kid that's working through math, I really do think the Math Academy one and spelling. I think it's mentioned Spelling Safari. I think those were really great curated ones that have been really strong. In terms of just something that you don't expect your kids to kind of fall in love with, I would get How to Teach Your Kids Shakespeare. It's a really great starter book, and then you can read your kids some of the. There's an Usborne, which is like an encyclopedia, but that has all of the Shakespeare plays like in common English. So you could just kind of read them through with your kids, and even just the stories themselves are really really provocative and fun. We also have a similar one for opera, which has been a super big hit. So I think I would say my favorite thing is to take really complicated things and find a really easy way to give them to your children. So don't be scared to, if Shakespeare's too scary, get the regular English version, and I look through those.
That's amazing. Well, this has been awesome. Hopefully, we can do a part 3 maybe in a couple
I
months.
would love it. I love talking to you.
No, this has been so awesome. And yes, I would highly recommend anybody go and read your posts, listen to your podcast. I'm an avid listener and reader. So if that says anything, I've definitely benefited from just the way that you think about things and the different perspectives, and also how kind you are to the varying approaches of homeschool that there are. You don't tell people what to do. You just say, here's what I'm learning and here's what's working for my family. And I think that approach is absolutely incredible.
Thank you. I'm honored. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful talking to you. It's always is.